me now is my friend and my colleague, and really someone who I would consider an expert on the file of the lack of evidence being uncovered at specifically the Kamloops Indian Residential School, Drea Humphrey. Drea, thanks for jumping on the show with me today. Uh, yeah, you put a really great question to leader of the official opposition, Pierre Poilievre, and we'll get to that in a second. But let's go back a little, just put this all into context. You made a documentary on this. So I think you're one of the few people in this country who have really gone looking for answers where there have been none. Tell us, if you were a new person to this topic, give us the Reader's Digest version of what we know about what happened at the Kamloops Indian Residential School.
Yeah, well, like myself and everybody else, we were the same. We heard this claim that came out May 27th, 2021, and that was that the Kamloops Secwépemc First Nation band government had discovered 215 children buried in an unmarked grave. It was unclear at first whether they were saying one unmarked grave or unmarked graves at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School. Now, when I heard that, I was just as shocked as everybody else. Got my boots on the ground. We went down there to bring everybody a report and make sure to talk to people. We talked to people who actually attended the school. There was so much sorrow, there was so much grief, but there were so many questions remaining, and I didn't expect to see that happening. So I would say that initial report that I did after the claim was probably the hardest report I ever had to do.
Sure.
Because I was blindsided with going, well, wait a second. The claim says that by use of ground penetrating radar, that is how they had discovered the remains of 215 former students as young as 6 years old. And so when you look into ground penetrating radar, you go, that's absolutely impossible to make a statement like that. Not only what's under the ground specifically, how many bodies are under the ground, but how old they are. So that's sort of the beginning of journalistically how I was like, okay, well, how do I juggle, the very real pain, letting the public know about that, but also letting the public know something else isn't quite right. And so I think that report, instead of it taking 48 hours to get up, it took like 2 weeks because I had to keep trying to get answers, which even now, I still don't get that directly from the band government. But I had to get enough to let everybody know in that first report that, hey, this is the claim. It doesn't seem like it would be unmarked graves, stuff like that. And I don't understand how they're getting that. So that's how it first happened. And the documentary came about a year later when it was kind of like, enough is enough. It's been a year and nothing has been made clear. The only thing that's made clear is that they had actually backpedaled. And the expert who made the discovery, Dr. Sarah Bullier, had now started saying it was 200 probable graves. So that got our boots on the ground yet again to just show people that what we were told was untrue.
And there hasn't been any real efforts to bring confirmation or closure. I think to find out that these are not graves would be a great thing for this country. And you would think that the powers that be would want to know, A, are these not graves? That's wonderful. A genocide was not committed there. Or on the flip side, if this is bad, how do we hold the responsible accountable? How do we bring closure to the families if that is the case? But there really has been none of that done.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And let's not forget about repatriation, which is really important to the Indigenous community. That is having what's rightfully yours returned back. So if there are hundreds of buried children there from that school, that means they're from all over British Columbia, which is not just the Secwépemc First Nation children. So usually you would think that you would want to know, A, what happened to these children and where do they belong, and bring them back rightfully so to have proper burials. So that's just another aspect of it.
So what is the reluctance then, do you think? I'm probably asking you to speculate here.
Yeah.
To excavate and find out, are these tree roots? Are these, weeping tiles? as might be the case based on some old records that have been uncovered? Or are these graves? And if they are graves, are they just forgotten graves
Mhm.
or something far more sinister? What I'm asking you to speculate. What's the reluctance to get to the bottom of this?
I can't really speak to the reluctance. I mean, I did speak to Cookbee chief herself, and she said, we're entertaining the thought of doing that, and they had the interlocutor involved and things like that. It seems overly complicated, but I will lay out some facts, and then the viewers can speculate on their own.
Sure.
It's not just the hesitation to excavate that raises questions. It's also the fact that the RCMP weren't allowed to do an investigation there. The BC Coroner's Office has never done an investigation there. So many people think there was a mass murder of children there. And to think that the RCMP and the BC Coroners has never actually investigated that property is quite shocking. Then you couple that with why the RCMP backed off. They initially, as you would expect them to do after that announcement, were asking questions, going there. And former Senator Murray St. Clair spoke on behalf of the ground penetrating radar specialist and basically said it was racism. He basically said, you're intimidating her by asking these questions, and I've advised her to lawyer up. And that was the end of it for the RCMP. So you have the specialist who makes this claim, who, by the way, I've looked into very much and really has no excuse to make such a claim through ground penetrating radar. She should know better based on her experience, who won't ask questions. And remember that there is RCMP right on the property, right beside the school. They are part of that community. It's not outsiders coming in. So even their own RCMP have not done an investigation. So I think that's important to know. And then we go 2.5 years later and there's still no excavating being done, no proper explanation for why, other than, we're trying to be culturally sensitive.
And there's money attached to this, right?
Yes.
Like Ottawa pledged $320 million to these bands so that they can search for residential school discoveries. And I don't know what, if any, strings are attached to that. Mm-hmm. Do you just get money to search, but you never actually have to search? I'm not sure how that works. There seems to be very little clarity or accountability to what appears to be $333 million just going out the door.
Yeah, it's actually, they pledged 330. I know that for sure they've handed out 90 million. But again, if people want to speculate based on facts, try to remember what big event happened in the world. It happened in America, but it had everybody looking into social justice issues, systemic racism, back just before May 2021. Can you remember what that was?
Yeah.
George Floyd, right?
Yeah.
So you had the Black Lives Matter movement and all the traction that was happening. And when you look in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report, one of the demands is that they want help finding these unmarked graves. They had oral testimony, even in Kamloops, that there was unmarked graves. So they wanted help. And the government actually said they would do that. They said they would give some money, but they never did. So what if it just seemed like the right time to shine light on this issue and get the money that they were owed, that they were told? And a week after that announcement went out, maybe less than a week, Patty Hadju, who she actually went out and said, okay, we're going to give 25 million, right away. That's what she said. And then what happened? Well, we have an unmarked grave. We have an unmarked grave. We have an unmarked grave. They were all reported as discoveries. But if you actually look, most of them had suspected they've had an unmarked grave there for quite some time. It wasn't something new. And many of them, unlike with the Kamloops Indian Residential School, many of the chiefs said, listen, we know there's a grave there. We know it was marked at one point. But over time, the crosses have broken down, and we just want to, give them a proper burial. That's totally fine. So again, you guys do the speculating.
Yeah, I mean, and when you look at the language attached to this, you see Justin Trudeau kneeling with a teddy bear at Cow's Nest First Nation, with his actor's tears in his eyes, crocodile tears.
Yeah.
using terms like genocide.
Mhm.
And what I will say about the United Nations, and as people know, I am not a fan of that organization in general, but they actually do a really good job of investigating real genocides, like
Mhm.
Rwanda, like the former Yugoslavia. They have teams of forensic investigators that go in. They can determine how old the people were, how they died, their ethnicity, all those things, um, to hold people to account. And I've often wondered why, if indeed this is a genocide, the way Trudeau has declared it, that we are a genocidal state, why has nobody called in the United Nations investigators who would do a good job of investigating this, except insofar as they probably don't want it investigated at all?
Yeah, a lot of it doesn't make sense. There's also there's been a halting of the money that we've been paying specifically for that. The First Nation there in Kamloops has said, we don't want any more. So
Right.
what's that about? That's interesting. Well, you haven't discovered exactly what's happened to the probable children underneath. So why stop? So I can't give the answer to the UN. I can't give a lot of answers. All
I
I
know,
can do
that's
is
the
ask the
problem.
questions and make sure that the public knows that this stain that has been put on Canada and Canadians on an international scale has never been confirmed.